Romeo and Juliet, Act 1, Scene 1. Let's go. So the play begins on the busy streets of Verona, Italy. Two guys from the Capulet family bump into and begin to harass two members of the Montague family, which leads to an all-out brawl in the middle of the street. Shortly after the fray begins, two important characters enter the scene: Benvolio, a Montague, and Tybalt, a Capulet. Benvolio is a good guy in this play, a peacekeeper. He's the voice of reason and really hates senseless violence. So he draws his sword and tries to stop the men from fighting. But Tybalt, who's a very angry and violent young man, says to Benvolio, "What, drawn and talk of peace? I hate the word, as I hate hell, all Montagues, and thee. Have at thee, coward." So Benvolio and Tybalt fight, and the skirmish gets completely out of control. And that's why the citizens of Verona chant, "Down with the Capulets and down with the Montagues." Because the citizens of Verona are sick and tired of the Capulets and Montagues fighting all the time. Imagine if two of your neighbors fought each other in the street in front of your house every day. You'd be upset too. And here's the most insane part of all. No one even remembers or seems to care why the two families have this long-standing feud in the first place. The specific reason for the Montague and Capulet feud is something that students generally want to know, but never get an answer for, because it's just not in the play. However, it's important to note that this detail, or lack of detail, is not vital in understanding the play. The feud is simply a plot device that Shakespeare uses to create and build conflict throughout the story. And believe me, we haven't even gotten started yet. Okay, let's get back on track. So the Montagues and Capulets are fighting, the citizens are yelling at them to stop fighting, and finally, the Prince of Verona descends from his royal chambers and makes a furious decree. "If ever you disturb our streets again, your lives shall pay the forfeit of the peace." Meaning, hey, if I catch any of you fools fighting again, you're dead. I'm gonna execute you. And keep in mind, the fact that Shakespeare sets this thread of execution up in the first act means it's definitely going to come back later in the play. You know someone's going to break that rule, you just don't know who, or when it's going to happen. Okay, so after the prince restores temporary order to the streets of Verona, Romeo enters the scene. Romeo is a teenager, and he's completely lovesick over a girl named Rosalind, because she just doesn't love him back. Benvolio is Romeo's cousin and best friend. So Benvolio tries talking some sense into Romeo and attempts to make him feel better by telling him to examine other beauties, basically saying, hey, there's other fish in the sea. The scene ends after Romeo tells Benvolio that he simply cannot forget about Rosalind because she's just that beautiful, and Benvolio promises to find another girl for Romeo to fawn over. Juliet's dad is head of the Capulet family, and he's talking to the wealthy County Paris. Paris is trying to persuade Daddy Capulet to let him marry Juliet, even though she's only 13 years old and Paris is in his mid to late 20s. Paris is also responsible for what may be the creepiest line in the entire play. After Juliet's father expresses hesitation about his daughter being married so young, Paris responds with, "Younger than she, or happy mother's maid." Capulet agrees and tells Paris to try and talk to Juliet at the party tonight to see if she's interested, because he will only agree to let her marry Paris if that's what she wants. Meanwhile, Romeo and Benvolio find out about the party at the Capulet mansion and make plans to crash it. The first time we meet Juliet, we also meet Lady Capulet and Juliet's nurse. Juliet and her mother have a somewhat strained relationship. Lady Capulet is cold and distant, and so the nurse acts like more of a mother to Juliet. Lady Capulet asks Juliet how she feels about marriage. It is apparent that Juliet's mother wants her to marry the County Paris. The nurse agrees, speaking particularly of how handsome Paris is when she says, "A man, young lady! Lady, such a man as all the world. Why, he's a man of wax," which basically means he's perfect. Lady Capulet asks Juliet point blank whether or not she will accept Paris's love. Juliet responds with, "I'll look to like if looking liking move," which means, "Sure, Mom, I'll give it a shot, but if I don't like him, I won't accept his love." It's nighttime, and Romeo and his friends are on their way to the Capulet masked ball. We meet Romeo's other best friend in this scene. His name is Mercutio. Mercutio is probably the strangest character in the play. If Romeo is the lovesick one and Benvolio is the peacekeeper, then Mercutio is the wild card. You can't predict what he's gonna say or do next. Like in this scene, while the group of friends are on their way to the party, Romeo begins to speak about a worrisome dream he had the night before. But Mercutio butts in and gives a long speech about the nature of dreams and the person or creature responsible for them. He calls her Queen Mab and describes her as holding a whip made of cricket's bone and riding a chariot made from an empty hazelnut shell. As Mercutio's speech goes on, it becomes more intense and darker in tone, until Romeo eventually cuts him off by saying, "Peace, peace, Mercutio, peace, thou talk'st of nothing." And Mercutio responds with, "True, I talk of dreams, which are the children of an idle brain," which is Mercutio's way of telling Romeo not to worry too much about dreams. However, Romeo's fears about attending the party are indeed justified, because his meeting with Juliet will set off a chain of events that will end in tragedy. Everyone has arrived at the Capulet masked ball, and Capulet himself welcomes his guests with a humorous speech. "Welcome, gentlemen. Ladies that have their toes unplagued with corns will walk about you." As Capulet speaks, Romeo gazes across the room and sees Juliet for the first time. It's love at first sight. Quick side note, you may or may not believe in love at first sight, which, whatever, that's your opinion. But in the world of this story, it does exist. So for the rest of the play, there is no question of whether or not Romeo and Juliet love each other. Okay, back to the scene. So Romeo sees Juliet for the first time and utters, "Oh, she doth teach the torches to burn bright. It seems she hangs upon the cheek of night, like a rich jewel in an Ethiop's ear, beauty too rich for use, for earth too dear." Unfortunately, Tybalt, Juliet's cousin, overhears Romeo and recognizes him from his voice. And remember, Romeo is a Montague, so he isn't even supposed to be at the Capulet party. This, by his voice, should be a Montague. Now in this next part, listen to how Tybalt justifies his rage against Romeo. "Now, by the stock and honor of my kin, to strike him dead, I hold it not a sin." Tybalt is basically saying that it would be an honor to kill Romeo, and he would be rewarded for doing so. So while Romeo's making his way over to Juliet, Tybalt has a private conversation with Capulet. Tybalt asks Capulet if he can murder Romeo right then and there, and Capulet responds with, "Content thee, gentle coz, let him alone." And he continues by basically saying that although the Montagues are their enemy, Romeo is generally seen as a good person and shouldn't be murdered, like Tybalt wants him to be. And to say truth, Verona brags of him to be a virtuous and well-governed youth. Tybalt gets even more angry and says, "I'll not endure him," to which Capulet becomes furious and responds with, "He shall be endured. What goodman boy? I say he shall. Go to. Am I the master here, or you? Go to." Tybalt agrees to leave Romeo alone, but before exiting the scene, he says under his breath, "Patience perforce with willful choler, meeting makes my flesh tremble in their different greeting. I will withdraw, but this intrusion shall now seeming sweet, convert to bitterest gall." Tybalt is basically saying, hey, I'll let it go now, but I will not forgive Romeo for attending this party, and I will kill him in the future. Tybalt's threat comes to a head at the beginning of Act 3, and serves as the turning point for the play. So Tybalt exits, and we turn our attention back to Romeo. Romeo has finally made his way over to Juliet, and he begins to flirt hard with her. "If I profane with my unworthiest hand this holy shrine, the gentle fine is this, my lips, two blushing pilgrims ready to stand, to smooth that rough touch with a tender kiss." They kiss, and Juliet says, "You kiss by the book," which basically means that Romeo's a good kisser. Juliet is called away to talk with her mother, and Romeo speaks to the nurse. The nurse tells Romeo that Juliet is the daughter of the Capulet family, and Romeo is devastated. So he says, "Is she a Capulet? Oh dear account, my life is my foe's debt." Romeo and Benvolio then leave the party, and Juliet finds out that Romeo is the son of the Montague family. Juliet, just as devastated as Romeo, says, "My only love, sprung from my only hate." What she means here is that Romeo is the only man she's ever felt in love with, but she is conflicted because he is part of the Montague family, whom she was raised to hate. And that's the end of Act 1 of Romeo and Juliet. If you have any questions about this video or anything else, leave a comment below and I'll try to answer you as soon as I can. Until next time.